Good evening, friends. Imagine this. Right now, you are wrapped in a wool blanket, sitting out on a vast pitch black prairie. You have spent the entire day driving cattle, and every bone in your body feels as though it has been taken apart and put back together. Your only comfort is that little flickering campfire in the distance and the steaming pot of beans sitting over it. Tonight, we are going to experience for ourselves how a cowboy in the American West of the 1870s managed to get a hot supper on a night cold enough to freeze water solid. Now dim the lights and let the chime carry you into tonight's story. You pull the blanket tighter around yourself. This damned weather, the wind carries an earthy smell and also the smell of cattle. Hundreds, maybe thousands, of cows are lowing and shifting in the darkness around you. They do not seem to care much about the cold, but you are different. You are a human being earning $1 a day, and right now your teeth are chattering from the cold. You are a cowboy, a drover, in later movies. That word sounds cool. But at this moment, it feels deeply ironic. You are more like a cattle babysitter, and a half-frozen one at that. Your horse, we'll call him Old Boy, is snorting somewhere not far away. He is worn out too. The two of you have been working since before dawn, moving that stubborn herd of Texas Longhorns from one bare pasture to another, trying to get them penned up before winter fully arrives. Now it is night, probably around 8 o'clock. You do not actually know the time. Your pocket watch gave up a long time ago. In conditions like these, the only thing you have left to judge time by is your stomach. And your stomach is protesting violently right now. It is clenching and twisting as if it were staging a small riot inside your body. When was the last time you ate? Oh, right, lunch. And that lunch consisted of gnawing on a few pieces of hardtack so hard they felt like stones while sitting in the saddle. Then washing them down with a few swallows of icy water that tasted faintly of rust. That did not count as a meal. That was just refueling. And with low-grade fuel at that. Now you need real heat. You need something that will keep you going through the next several hours, especially through the dreadful night watch that always feels worst in the dead of night. Your gaze moves past the wavering firelight toward the center of camp. There stands a wagon, a chuck wagon. It is the heart of your little outfit, its soul, its filling station, and its only real hope. And the man in control of that hope has his back to you now, crouched beside the fire, stirring a black iron pot with a long-handled spoon. Your stomach growls again, louder this time. You quickly jab the greenhorn beside you with your elbow, a young fellow from back east whose peach fuzz is not even fully shaved off, yet wanting him to keep it down. But in truth, you know perfectly well that the sound did not come from him. It came from you. Hunger is a very primitive force in the American West of the 1870s. Hunger was a constant. What you are doing now is one of the hardest forms of physical labor on earth. Every day, you spend 12 to 16 hours bouncing in a saddle. And you are not just sitting there. You are constantly turning, accelerating, stopping short. You use your body and your horse's body to persuade hundreds, sometimes thousands, of animals 10 times heavier than you and with much worse tempers to move in the direction you want. The number of calories that burns is staggering later. Historians and nutrition experts estimated that a working trail cowboy needed at least 0 to 0 calories a day just to maintain his weight. That number is far higher than what an ordinary office worker today, or even many athletes, would need. So, your craving for food is written into your bones. You need fat, you need carbohydrates, you need protein, and you need a lot of all three. That is why, when the greenhorn complained that it was beans again, you only rolled your eyes. Beans, beans, a salvation. Beans, a hope. Beans are the finest thing in the world besides whiskey. There is nothing refined about your diet, Refinement belongs to the bankers in tight suits back in St. Louis. In your world, there's only energy, of course. You were not born loving beans. You simply know what life is like without them. Back in the earlier days of Western settlement, when supply lines were even less reliable, hunger was a real threat. Among cowboys and pioneers, there was a term for it, a thieving stomach. That did not mean literally stealing someone else's food. It meant that long, chronic sensation of hunger that robs you of your strength, your judgment, and eventually your health. It feels as though your stomach is robbing your body from the inside. You pat your empty belly tonight. You need that pot of beans. You do not care if they have been cooked too soft. You do not care if a few horse hairs may have fallen into them. You just need them, and honestly, what other choice do you have? Apples do not grow out on this prairie, and there is no bakery in sight. Your supplies were all bought in one go months ago in Dodge City. There are only so many foods that keep well for long periods and still provide enough energy. Flour, salt pork, coffee beans, sugar, and beans old. Dry, rock-hard pinto bean. As for whether cowboys truly liked their daily fare, no one can say for sure. Some people think it was an acquired taste, that if you ate it long enough, you naturally came to love that simple, smoke-blackened flavor. Others insist the cowboys only ate it because they had no choice, and that, in the deepest part of their hearts, they longed for a plate of mashed potatoes covered in gravy, and a real steak. The irony, of course, is that they drove thousands of cattle and rarely got to eat fresh beef. But you do not have time to dwell on that, because the man in charge of the beans is standing up now. You sit up straight at once, trying not to look too much like a starving stray dog whining for scraps. The man getting up is Cookie. That is not his real name. Nobody knows his real name. Out here, Cookie is the standard title for the camp cook, whether he is sweet or bitter by nature. And the man in front of you is plainly the latter. He is a man in his 50s, and one leg gives him trouble, supposedly because a stubborn cow stepped on it in Wyoming a few years back. Because of that leg, he can no longer ride hard all day the way the rest of you do, so he has been demoted, or perhaps shifted sideways into the role of the outfit's cook. You absolutely, positively, under no circumstances want to offend him. He is king of this wilderness. He is your lifeline. He controls the sacred coffee, the precious beans, and the belly-filling soda bread. A cowboy might talk back to the trail boss. He might get into a fist fight with another hand, but he would never dare show disrespect to the cook. And that is not just out of courtesy. It is because of the actual power structure in most cattle-driving outfits. The cook is the second highest paid man in camp, behind only the trail boss. He may even make twice what you ordinary cowboys make. You earn $1 a day. He may earn 2 or more. Why? Because a good cook keeps morale high. A bad cook can tear the whole outfit apart in 3 days. The cook in front of you belongs to that category of men who are bad-tempered but reasonably competent. Right now, he is pointing his long spoon at the greenhorn who complained earlier. "Kid," he says in a hoarse voice, "you either eat or go sleep with the cattle." "Don't hold me up." The greenhorn snaps his mouth shut immediately. The cook's authority is absolute. His territory is centered on that chuck wagon. A circle with a radius of about 20 feet around it is sacred ground. You do not ride your horse into that space. You do not make unnecessary trouble near his fire. And you definitely do not lift the lid off his pot before he announces supper. That is a capital offense among capital offenses. You once saw a fellow who did not know the rules try it. The result was that the cook took that same scalding spoon, still slick with bean broth, and branded the man's face with a temporary mark. Ever since then, everyone has behaved. Some written accounts paint the cook as the mother figure of camp, tending to a pack of reckless young men. But judging from Cowboys' diaries and oral histories, they usually saw the cook as a tyrant, a bad-tempered, obsessively clean, absolutely dictatorial tyrant. You think tyrant is exactly the right word. You watch this tyrant turn and head back to his throne, that beat-up but highly functional chuck wagon. It is his kitchen, his bedroom, and his moving fortress, all in one. You regard that wagon with awe. By day, it looks like nothing more than an ordinary, sturdy, four-wheeled wooden wagon. But at night, it transforms. That chuck wagon was one of the greatest inventions of the late 19th century, at least as far as cowboys like you are concerned. Its inventor, Charles Goodnight, a legendary rancher, modified a tough surplus army wagon in 1866. He added a kitchen cabinet to the rear, built with shelves and compartments, with a water bucket hanging on one side and tools on the other. It was sheer genius. You are staring at that rear cabinet now. It looks like an enormous, intricate puzzle box. The cook drops the hinged panel down, and it instantly becomes a perfect work surface. Behind it are countless little drawers and compartments, like some old apothecary chest. You know what is in those cubbies. Flour and salt over here, coffee beans and sugar over there. If the cook is feeling generous, there may even be a little drawer reserved just for spices, and another place for his treasured knives. But the most ingenious part of the chuck wagon may not be that cabinet at all. It may be the sound it makes as the wagon rolls over rough prairie ground. All the cookware hanging from both sides, pots, pans, coffee pots, tin plates bangs against itself in a shrill clatter of metal. To people back east, it is just noise pollution. But to you cowboys who have spent months out in the wild, that jingling is the sound of home. It means food, coffee, and a warm fire are not far away. It is a kind of reassuring, rhythmic chaos. You watch the cook pull something out of one of the compartments, probably more salt, or maybe chili powder, and toss it into the big black pot. This wagon is his kingdom. Under the wagon, there is usually a greasy sack hanging, meant to catch the drippings and meat scraps from his cooking. Those can be used next time to grease the axles, or if you are unlucky, to season your next meal. Best not think too hard about that. All you can see now is the cook reaching up to a big hook on the side of the wagon and taking down tonight's star, a heavy sack of dry, ugly beans. You can almost smell them already. That raw bean smell, plain and earthy, with a trace of dirt to it. The cook unties the sack, and with a tin cup, pours out a heap of them in a rattling rush. They are pinto beans. In the American West of the 19th century, pinto beans were hard currency in the world of beans. Why them? The reason is simple and brutal. They were dirt cheap, and they kept extremely well. Dry beans could sit for years without going bad. They were packed with protein and carbohydrates. Their nutritional density was excellent to the trail boss. They were the most economical option. To the cook, they were an ingredient that demanded the least worry. To you, they were the main food you would be eating for the next 3 months, in every form imaginable. For breakfast, you might get beans with soda bread. For lunch, if you had time to stop and eat it all, you might get cold beans with salt pork. And for supper, which is what this is, you would be fortunate enough to get hot beans. If the cook happened to be in a good mood, he might add some leftover bacon scraps from yesterday, or a little molasses. Then, the meal would be respectfully called sweet beans, and that was practically a holiday. You watch him dump the dry beans into a large basin. They look like a pile of small brown pebbles, naturally. Cowboys had a love-hate relationship with this food that showed up everywhere. They had countless nicknames for beans, and one of the most famous may have been Arizona strawberry. Why? Because out on the Arizona range, that was the only fruit you were likely to get. That is classic cowboy humor. self-mocking, and resigned. You have even heard coarser names for beans, but you would not dare say them in front of the cook. Your only question now is this: how is he going to turn beans this hard into supper? It has not even been dark that long. The answer is that the cook is smarter than you think and more organized. The beans he is pouring into that basin right now are not for tonight. They are for tomorrow night. You watch him lift the water bucket and pour water over tomorrow's beans. That simple action is practically a science in itself on a prairie where water is desperately scarce. Your water source is usually some creek you passed along the way, or a muddy pool. The water always has a faint alkaline taste, or worse, the smell of manure. Your water buckets hang on the coolest side of the chuck wagon. This is the cook's strategic reserve, more precious than gold. He uses that precious water to soak the beans, because pre-soaking dry beans shortens the time they need to simmer over the fire by quite a bit. In the West, where firewood or even dried dung is just as scarce, saving an hour of cooking time is a major victory. A cook would usually set the beans to soak the night before, or early that same morning. That way, by the time camp was made in the evening, the beans had already drunk their fill and were ready for the pot. But there is a small secret to it. You lean in, trying to see whether the cook adds anything to the soaking water. Some seasoned cooks would stir in a little baking soda. If camp had no baking soda, they might even grab a clean handful of wood ash from the fire, tie it up in a cloth, and drop it into the water. Why? In theory, the alkaline substance in baking soda or ash helps soften the skins of the beans so they absorb water faster and cook down more easily. But it also has another side effect. We will get to that later. For now, all you can think is that using precious water just to soak beans feels like a luxury. And you are not entirely sure you trust the taste of that water. You just hope tonight's batch did not come from the stretch downstream where the herd passed through earlier. The cook seems satisfied with his soaking water. He covers the basin and sets it behind one of the wagon wheels, so nobody will accidentally knock it over. Then he turns to tonight's true star. Those beans have already been soaking all day, and now he pours them all at once into a big black, heavy iron pot. That black iron pot is the cook's ultimate weapon. It is not just any pot. It is a Dutch oven. The name is a little odd. It is not from Holland, and it is not really an oven. It is a thick-walled cast iron pot with a lid. Its defining trait is that it is heavy, very, very heavy. A medium-sized Dutch oven weighs well over a dozen pounds, even when empty. But that very heaviness is what makes it a miracle for outdoor cooking. Iron conducts and holds heat beautifully. It spreads heat evenly through the food and keeps a relatively stable temperature, even when the fire is less than steady. You watch the cook throw the soaked beans into it, along with several chunks of chopped salt pork, a handful of onions, and heaven knows what seasoning. Then he adds water and puts on that heavy lid, sealing it tight. That lid is the key. Its edge has a raised rim, and that design is brilliantly clever. The real magic of the Dutch oven is that it allows heat to come from all directions. The cook will not set this iron pot directly over the flames. If he did, the beans would scorch at the bottom instead. He places it among the coals beside the fire. More importantly, he takes a shovel and lifts red-hot coals, then spreads them evenly across the lid with the raised rim. That way, the heat does not come only from below, it also comes from above. Now the iron pot becomes a true oven. The beans inside are not being boiled. They are being slow cooked. That makes them heat more evenly and turn softer and creamier. The fat from the salt pork is forced out perfectly and melts into the broth. It is practically a 19th-century combination of a pressure cooker and an air fryer. And now that black pot has been carefully settled by the cook into an ideal position beside the fire, It needs heat, but here comes the problem. You look around. There is not a single tree on this whole prairie. The last decent stand of timber you saw was probably 3 days ago. So where is the fire supposed to come from? You shiver. The wind seems even stronger now. The flames in the fire are blowing crooked. The cook frowns. He needs more fuel, and he needs fuel that burns low and steady. Not this flashy fire that gives more flame than lasting heat. He turns and looks at the greenhorn beside you, kid. The cook yells, "Quit sitting there. Go get me some firewood." The greenhorn freezes, then grabs a sack and hurries off into the darkness. You secretly feel relieved because you know perfectly well that what he is about to gather is not wood at all. Out here on the Great Plains, wood is rarer than gold. But there is another renewable fuel, and there is plenty of it. Dried cow chips, and earlier still, dried buffalo chips. These droppings in the dry air and constant wind dehydrate quickly and turn into light, fibrous patties like brittle biscuit. They catch fire easily, and supposedly they burn with almost no odor at all, just a faint grassy smoke, or so the books say. You watch the greenhorn return with half a sack of firewood, wearing an expression that is part confusion, part disgust, and somehow, for reasons even he cannot explain, part old-fashioned shame. The cook takes the sack and inspects the fuel with the fussiness of a jeweler examining diamonds, because not all cow dung is equal. What he wants is the kind that is completely dry, grayish in color and light in texture. If it is too fresh, it will not burn. It will only produce choking smoke and ruin a whole pot of beans. This job usually falls to the least experienced hand in camp, someone like that greenhorn. In cowboy slang, the unlucky soul responsible for gathering fuel, scrubbing pots, and helping the cook with odds and ends had his own title, essentially meaning an apprentice hand. You are very glad you are past that stage. You watch the cook carefully stack several good cow chips around the Dutch oven, then crumble more over the lid. They burn quietly and steadily, giving off a smell that is hard to describe, something halfway between earth and smoke. As for what that fuel actually smells like, people who like to romanticize life in the West insist that the smoke from burning cow chips is fresh and pleasant. The cowboys who actually ate food cooked over it used plainer language in their diaries, usually language far less fresh. Historians, of course, are more inclined to say that the smell of dung depends on what the cattle ate. You do not care what the cattle ate. You only care that the black iron pot is now wrapped in even heat. And now there is nothing left for you and the beans to do but wait. Waiting is one of the hardest parts of this job during the day. There is always work to do, driving cattle, standing patrol, repairing tech. But once camp is made at night, you and your supper are separated by this long, useless, miserable stretch of simmering time. A pot of truly good Western beans, or at least beans fully cooked through needs to simmer low and slow. Not a hard boil, but that soft blurping half boil that barely seems to happen at all. Even with a Dutch oven and dried cow chips, the process still takes at least 3 to 4 hours. Whether or not you eat before midnight depends entirely on how early the cook set the beans up. You sit not too close to the fire and not too far. Too close, and the cook will say you are in the way. Too far, and you lose what little warmth there is. The cold wind whistles past your ears. You bury your face in the rough blanket and try to doze, but you cannot sleep. Your stomach is complaining, and worse, you can smell it now. That scent, a blend of smoke, rendered pork fat, the sweetness of onion, and the plain starchy smell of the beans themselves rides the wind and slips straight into your nose. It is torture, A few of the other hands have already ignored the cold and stretched out on their beds, if you can call them that. Their entire household consists of a few blankets rolled inside a piece of waterproof canvas. But you cannot sleep yet, because tonight you have the second shift on night guard. That means from 10 o'clock until midnight, you will be on horseback, half a mile from camp, circling slowly around that restless herd. You have to make sure they do not spook at wolves. You have to keep them from stampeding at a sudden clap of thunder. You must sit out there in the wind, alone or with one other unlucky fool, humming quietly under your breath to soothe the animals with sound. And you have to do all of that hungry. It is cruel. You wish the cook would hurry. Quite a few people even believed cooks deliberately dragged out the cooking every time, because it was a show of power. By controlling when supper was served, a cook controlled the mood and rhythm of the whole outfit. As long as the beans were not done, a bunch of overworked, over-hormoned young men could not get rowdy. All they could do was sit obediently around the fire and wait. Whether that theory is true, you do not know. You only know that right now, you would gladly trade next week's wages for the cook to say one single word: done. When, as you are thinking that, you suddenly hear a loud pop. Not a gunshot. You turn your head and see old John, a bearded old cowboy, not far from you, shifting awkwardly and pretending to study the stars. Too many beans. There is really no avoiding that. You pretend you did not hear anything, and did not smell anything either. That is campfire etiquette. You have to face reality. Eating beans, especially on the plains, and especially beans at every meal, comes with certain auditory and olfactory side effects. Beans are rich in carbohydrates called oligosaccharides. The human stomach and small intestine do not have the enzymes needed to fully break those sugars down, so they pass more or less intact into the large intestine, and there trillions of gut bacteria throw themselves a grand banquet. They love oligosaccharides. As they break those sugars down, they produce enormous amounts of gas, mostly hydrogen, methane, and carbon dioxide. And all that gas has to leave by some route or other. So a cowboy camp, especially after supper, may not have been the freshest smelling place in the world. The movies never tell you that. The cowboys in the movies are always handsome, silent, and cool. In real life, they were probably noisy, and the phenomenon was so common at the time that beans picked up another nickname in cowboy slang: the musical fruit, or more bluntly, prairie oysters. Please note that the phrase had many meanings in Western usage. This was just one of the more inventive ones. The old John beside you is clearly one of the party's most devoted participants. Cowboys generally treated this sort of thing by completely ignoring it. In a harsh, all-male environment like this, nobody was going to be embarrassed by something so minor. In fact, it could even become a form of entertainment. Some cowboy might joke that another man's fart was louder than the Kansas wind. And that little secret about adding baking soda when soaking the beans, there is another explanation for it. Scholars believe that alkaline substances like baking soda may do more than soften beans. They may also help break down some of those hard-to-digest oligosaccharides ahead of time. In other words, that handful of ash the cook throws into the bean water may not just be there to make the beans softer. It may also be there to make you cowboys a little quieter at night. Does it really work? The scientific evidence is still murky. But if it can make tonight's guard shift even a little more bearable, you fully support the cook's superstition. You are pondering this serious chemical question when suddenly a vicious gust of wind tears through camp. This wind is different. It is not just cold. You smell sand. The fire collapses sideways in a burst, and you see the cook shout and grab an oilcloth, lunging toward his treasure, the Dutch oven. Damn it! The cook roars into the wind, his voice distorted by the gale. Yank the scarf around your neck, up over your mouth and nose, but too late. Your mouth is already full of grit. The weather on the Great Plains is like a moody tyrant. 1 second, the sky may be clear, and the next there may be a dust storm. Later in the season, it might just as easily be a blizzard. Tonight, you won the prize. This blast of wind comes carrying the topsoil of several states straight at your camp. For you, it is merely miserable. For the cook, it is a disaster. He is kneeling by the fire now, using his own body and a sheet of oilcloth to build a windbreak around the Dutch oven. If the wind blows the fire out, the beans will cool off half cooked. If it blows sand into the pot, that is even worse. On the list of things cowboys complained about most, sand in the food ranked near the top all year long. And that was not because the cook did not care about cleanliness. Think about it. Every bit of your cooking is done outdoors. Your kitchen is a patch of exposed ground. Your fuel is dried dung that comes with dirt built in. Your coworkers are a bunch of cowboys who have just been rolling in dust to cool themselves and their cattle. Keeping food sterile is impossible. The goal is less sand, and right now, that cook is fighting for that goal. He has to protect that pot of beans until they are fully done. You see the trail boss come over too. Together, he and the cook try to use the body of the chuck wagon to block the worst of the wind. As for what exactly ended up in cowboy food, that probably depended on the individual cook's personal lower limit. You just hope tonight's cook wins this battle. The wind seems to ease up a little. At least it is not hitting as hard as before. The cook gets shakily to his feet and brushes the dirt off himself. He lifts the oilcloth and taps the lid of the Dutch oven with the back of his spoon, listening to the sound from inside. He seems satisfied. Then he straightens, clears his throat, and the camp falls instantly silent. Even the wind seems to hush a little. The cook takes a deep breath, and in that voice of his that could carry through a blizzard, shouts the long-awaited sacred word, "Supper!" You are practically launched out of your seat. Every cowboy still awake reacts as if he has heard a starting pistol. Everyone grabs his gear and heads straight for the chuck wagon. Your gear is simple: a tin plate, a tin cup, and a spoon or fork if you are particular. There is a strict unwritten code for lining up at the chuck wagon. The cook is the first man, and the only man giving order. Rule 1. You line up, no cutting. Rule 2. You eat what the cook serves you. You do not pick through the pot trying to fish out extra pieces of salt pork. That is a serious offense. Rule 3. The trail boss usually goes first because he may still have work to assign after supper. Rule 4, and the most important of all, no complaining. Under absolutely no circumstances do you make a negative comment about the food. If you think the beans are too salty or the bread is burnt, your choices are to keep quiet and eat it or stay hungry. You stand in line with your tin plate, breathing in that rich smell. The cook lifts the lid off the Dutch oven, and a rush of white steam rises into the cold air. Carrying the scent of meat and beans, like some sacred rite, he is using a large ladle to scoop out the stew boiling hot. Thick, dark brown, and drop it onto your plates, one scoop at a time. Then it is your turn. You hold out your plate. Thank you. Cookie, you say sincerely. The cook does not answer. He only grunts and slaps a heaping ladleful onto your plate. Then, from another Dutch oven beside the first, he takes out a golden piece of soda bread and drops it next to your bean. You carry this heavy, scalding supper back toward the fire as carefully as if it were the Holy Grail. Before you can sit down, though, you see the greenhorn walking toward the water bucket with his plate. Kid, what the hell are you doing? Old John calls out. I was going to rinse my plate, the greenhorn says quietly. There's still some grease from yesterday on it. That is another rule. After eating, You do not use precious drinking water to wash your plate. So how do you clean it? You have two options. Option 1. Wipe it with a communal rag, which is usually greasy. Option 2. Sand. You reach down, grab a handful of clean dry sand and scrub your plate hard with it, grinding off the grease and scrap. Then you wipe it dry with your bandana and let the prairie sun, or tonight, the prairie wind, sanitize the rest. Whether this sand washing method was really hygienic is another matter. A modern public health expert might faint on the spot, but some historians believe that under those conditions, it may actually have been the most water-efficient and practical method available. Dry sand is an excellent abrasive, and sunlight is an excellent disinfectant. As for doing it at night, well, you just look the other way. The cook gives the greenhorn a good bawling out. You lower your head and focus on the feast in front of you. At last, you sit down. You test the temperature of the plate with your hand. It is hot, good. You lift a heaping spoonful. This is the classic supper of the 1870s American West. On your plate are pinto beans mixed with salt-cured pork. That salt pork has so little lean meat on it, you can barely see any at all. It is basically pure fat preserved in salt. During cooking, that fat melts down and becomes the only real source of richness in the bean. The brown little scraps left after the fat has rendered out are the only meat you are likely to find in the pot. You put the spoonful in your mouth. The taste is complicated. First comes the heat. That warmth rushes from your mouth straight to your stomach, and your body actually shudders at the sudden arrival of it. Then comes the salt. The cook was a little heavy-handed with it today, but you do not care. You sweated so much during the day that your body needs the salt. Then comes the texture of the beans. They have been cooked down so thoroughly that they are almost bean mash. The skins have split. The starches inside have completely broken loose, turning the whole broth thick and dense. Can you taste anything else? Actually, yes. There is a trace of campfire smoke, a flavor unique to the Dutch oven and the dung fuel. You can even detect a faint gritty texture from the sand. Your teeth make a slight unpleasant crunch. That is tonight's seasoning. You take another bite. Now you can really distinguish between the beans and the little scraps of salt pork. As for whether this stuff actually tastes good, that probably depends on how hungry you are. Historians generally agree on one point. Hunger is the finest seasoning. To a man who has spent 8 hours sitting in an office and just finished afternoon tea, this plate of bean, mush mixed with salt and sand, might taste like pig shit. But to you, a cowboy who has ridden 14 hours in cold wind and is so hungry your belly feels glued to your spine, this is 3 Michelin stars. It is the best thing you have ever eaten in your life. You take that piece of soda bread and carefully, reverently, wipe up every last bit of bean gravy left on your plate and shove it into your mouth. You are done eating, but supper is not over yet. There is one final step, and it may be the most important one of all. You grab your tin cup and head back toward the chuck wagon. There is another black iron pot there, smaller and taller than the one the beans cooked in. It is a big coffee pot, if beans are the fuel of the cowboy. Coffee is his soul. Cowboys can put up with going without meat under extreme conditions. They can even put up with going without beans. But they cannot put up with going without coffee. You hold out your cup, and the cook fills it to the brim from the big pot. The coffee is black, not dark brown. Black like asphalt. This is the legendary cowboy coffee. Its preparation is simple and brutal. Boil water, throw in a handful of coffee beans, usually roasted beforehand and crushed, not ground, then keep boiling. Once you think it is done, boil it 5 minutes more. There is no filtering involved. All the grounds stay in the pot. And in your cup, you carry the steaming cup of mud back to the fire and take a careful sip. It is scalding hot, It is bitter. It is brutally strong. That bitter, smoky liquid cuts through the dulled state of your taste buds after the beans like a bolt of lightning. You feel alive again. There is almost no nuance of flavor in this coffee. It is pure caffeine and heat, and that is exactly what you need. Old John beside you is happily dumping 3 big spoonfuls of sugar into his cup. Yes, sugar, one of the very few sweets in this hard life. You have no sugar, but you do have this hot cup of coffee. You cradle the tin cup in both hands and feel the heat pass from your palms into your fingers. This warmth is more direct than the fire, more invigorating than the beans. You feel like yourself again. You tip back the last of the coffee in a single swallow. A wave of warmth begins in your stomach and spreads slowly but firmly through your limb. It is remarkable. 5 minutes ago, you were just a shell of a man, shivering in the wind and close to freezing stiff. Now you are fed. Now you are full. Inside your body, you have a heat source. That high-calorie, high-fat, high-carbohydrate supper is already being converted into fuel. Your metabolism is speeding up. Your circulation is coming back. You can feel your fingers and toes, the parts that had almost gone numb, waking up again. That is what the pot of beans has done for you. It may not be pretty. It may not be refined. It may even still have sand in it. But it has completed its mission. It has kept you alive in a harsh environment. And it has kept you warm. Cowboys had an expression. Filled with beans. That did not just mean full from eating. It also meant energized, ready to take on anything. Even though all you want to do now is sleep, you know that when the trail boss comes kicking at your bedroll at 2 in the morning and tells you it is your turn on night watch, the energy stored in those beans will give you what you need to climb up yourself onto the saddle and ride out into that freezing darkness. You take one last look at the Dutch oven. The cook has already wiped it clean and gotten it ready for tomorrow's work. As for cowboy life itself, whether it was really what the later movies made it out to be, free, romantic, adventurous, or whether it was, as some revisionist historians argue, nothing more than dirty, low-paid agricultural labor done on horseback. That debate may never be settled, but for you, right now, none of that matters. You pull the blanket tighter around yourself. The wind is still blowing, but it no longer feels so sharp. The herd is quiet in the distance, softly ruminating. The firelight jumps in the dark, warm and alive. You are full, you are safe, your eyelids are getting heavy, and now you can feel that warmth. Can't you? It is like a small, gentle, furry flame burning quietly in your stomach. You are not that cowboy sitting in the cold wind anymore. You are only someone listening to a story, lying in your own comfortable bed. The weight of your body is sinking into the soft mattress. Slowly, slowly, you are drifting down, falling into a dream that is warm and safe. Can you still hear the wind in the distance? That is not the cold Kansas wind anymore. That is your fan, humming you a lullaby. And the smell of the beans is fading too, turning into the familiar, reassuring scent of your pillow. You worked hard today too, just like that cowboy, but your night watch is over now. Now you can rest. Now you can sleep.